Hello and welcome to my media project for Community Psych 270. My name is Clare, Delaney, and today we will be discussing the depression of college students during online learning while the world was in lockdown after the coronavirus grew to become a major threat to our livelihood. Before we begin, let's discuss the problem in a nutshell to gain some context. So the coronavirus was on the back burner for many at the start of 2020, but truly came to be a serious threat in the middle of March. Here is where quarantine began. Schools transferred to online teaching and learning methods, leaving many confused and isolated. From this online learning, a decrease in overall mental health and productivity is noted, as well as dramatic increases in depression. In this presentation, we are going to analyze this issue through a community psychologist perspective and use their thinking and psychological tools to reach some conclusions. Our main purpose is to try to cultivate ways or methods to reduce these depression rates while learning online. So some components to highlight when tackling this issue are number 1, theory, number 2, investigate, 3, educate, and 4, prevention and promotion. All of these come together to encapsulate our problem and develop a sound conclusion and methods to help and prevent. These are core steps for many community psychologists on their journey to discover and analyze social issues alike. Let's get started. Remember, we are community psychologists now. To brush up on definitions and vocabulary, a theory is an idea or set of ideas that explain or predict a phenomenon or construct. They allow us to predict, describe, explain, understand, and all of the important mental processing and relating. Theories can be applied to an endless amount of topics or categories in society. They also help us understand social contexts, changes, and settings. Their goal is to improve, not worsen, and especially aim for inclusivity. Specifically, as a community psychologist, theories address the main cause of the problem, include the context or history of culture or social society, and make connections with the problem in culture and social settings. Now let's theorize. Put your community psychologist thinking caps on. Let's identify the components necessary to formulate a valid theory. We must have a problem or root, context, and then put it all together as a theory. So our problem is depression during the coronavirus quarantine due to online learning and school closures. Our context is how online learning meant no social interaction and activities and more isolation and independent activities. Thus, when we formulate a theory, we may say that, due to the isolation and anxieties during quarantine, students learning virtually become more depressed because of a lack of engagement and socialness. Let's try applying and relating existing theories. Part of being a community psychologist is working with others, and this is a perfect way to implement that. The behavioral setting theory from 1968 describes how a certain setting creates a certain behavior, independent of individuals, meaning that any individual in that setting would exhibit the same behavior. This is interesting to apply to this topic because I believe this theory rings true, and that anyone in this setting of online learning in your room all day would exhibit the same behavior. However, this is all up to your interpretation. You can also apply Kelly's ecological theory, which is a framework on how we can think about adapting and being in different environments. This theory has concepts of interdependence, where one aspect impacts another, which focuses on forming relationships and how they relate and affect each other. This applies to online learning and depression because obviously some relationships were damaged during this time, which was harmful to that individual who couldn't go to school in person and see their peers. Also, adaptation is about succeeding in different contexts, and obviously, online learning is an apparent adaptation from a classroom environment. Finally, cycling of resources is all about the use and incorporation of resources, which can be apparent in building up a community or school in a COVID-friendly way to help circumvent these high rates of depression during online learning. Lastly, we can apply and think about a sense of community, which is both a theory and a construct. A sense of community is kind of self-explanatory. It is a feeling of belonging and being interdependent within a group. It is measured with 4 components: membership, influence, integration, and fulfillment of needs, and a shared emotional connection. All things a person needs to feel a part and included in a community. Obviously, in relation to depression rates of college students while online learning, there is definitely a shift in that sense of community in college because of virtual learning, which can cause a spike in depression. Enough with theorizing, now let's investigate. We have to ask ourselves why. Our community psychologist selves are going to try the research method of a survey. Remember, all research psychologists must consume research, then critique it, and finally conduct it. And as community psychologists, we must work with our community peers, identify community issues, and try to develop a solution from our survey to solve these issues. This quantitative research survey contains closed questions designed by us, community psychologists. This survey was sent to college students at Michigan State University, and a total of 50 filled it out. The first question asks if one's mood was impacted by online learning, and results show 100% that it was. Next question asked if you felt more depressed while online learning. 88% said yes, 6% said they were depressed, but not because of online learning, other reasons, and then less than 6% said no. The final question is a follow-up to the second question. If you answered yes to being depressed while online learning, why do you feel this way? 43.5% said it was because of a lack of human interaction, and the follow-up to that is 21.7% said it was because they were feeling isolated. So let's gather our takeaways from this survey. Majority of college students did feel depressed while online learning, and all of their moods were impacted in one way or another. The main reason for this depression was a lack of human interaction, but isolation came in second. These reasons were a core part of our theory, so this was a successful and noteful investigation. Time to educate. Let's think about what we know. A lack of human interaction may cause depression because it increases the production of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. This may pose many health concerns and threats to our immune system with an influx of this hormone. Also, a study was done correlating more than 6 hours of screen time a day to a higher likelihood of developing moderate to severe depression. Additionally, sitting all day poses a greater risk of depression alone. This act is exactly what online learning entails, so a greater risk is in this sedentary lifestyle as well. Finally, the brain can't process info online in a normal way because of certain cues that aren't picked up correctly, such as eye contact and body language. Without a brain processing these cues all day, there will be a struggle because we are naturally social creatures. This diagram displays how stress ignites hormones, referred to as HPA axis, which may potentially lead to depression. On to the fourth and final step or component, prevention and promotion. It is time for an intervention, which is an action to address a social problem or human needs or wellness. We wish to promote wellness and prevent distress. Prevention is all about not letting something culminate or happen. Kaplan's model lays out prevention in 3 tiers. Primary includes the whole population and reduces incidence. Secondary includes early signs and symptoms and reduces prevalence. Tertiary entails treatment. Promotion entails mental wellness and self-care. It has risk factors which relate to an increased risk of depression and protective factors that relate to a decreased risk. In efforts to alleviate depression in college students during online learning, there are certain steps and methods we can try in prevention and promotion. For prevention, a primary prevention could be that all college students have a universal limit to how long they can be on Zoom. This limit can be set to ensure that students are not having an exceeded amount of screen time where they are at an increased risk of depression and other mental illnesses. A secondary prevention would be personal mental health check-ins or evaluations after or to check for early symptoms. A tertiary prevention would be mental health days while online learning or special accommodations for those that can truly not handle the online learning style in a more personal context. On the other side is promotion of wellness for better mental health while online learning. Risk factors of this promotion would lead to an increased risk of developing depression. They would be if an individual was an only child or lacked the proper resources to be successful online to receive an adequate education. Protective factors to decrease the risk of developing depression while online learning would be having siblings or friends to still connect with virtually or at home, therapy, and the right resources to succeed academically and socially. Promotion in community psychology entails reducing chances of problems and increasing successes and capabilities. So we did it. We found ways to prevent depression while online learning and promote mental wellness during these unprecedented times. It is now time to take action and implement them. Well done, everyone. You can now scratch being a community psychologist off your bucket list.